welcome everybody. As Irina mentioned, please put your questions in the chat and she'll be collating them. I was going to give a very brief explanation of what we mean by platform co-ops, but seeing the poll, it sounds like the audience already knows quite a lot about it. So I'll be really brief just for those that might be joining us that aren't that aware. So just very briefly, by a platform business, we mean a business that is transacting mainly through a digital platform. So that's their main form of transaction. And in particular, it's where the platform brings together different types of stakeholders. So much less the idea of like, a retail, a supermarket, that also has an online platform, but more how a digital platform can connect different types of stakeholders, how we've seen with examples like Airbnb, Deliveroo, Uber, etc. And as these digital platforms have entered our lives, we have obviously felt that we've benefited a lot, but they've also brought with them quite a lot of problems, from like the impact that they have on workers' rights, to how our data is used, to the overwhelming power that the companies behind these platforms have, etc. And so I started becoming interested in this topic when I realized what an amazing alternative the idea of setting up a platform as a cooperative could provide. And very simply, I mean, the idea is that a platform business is run as a cooperative, so following the cooperative principles. But just to bring it really to the basic concepts, that the platform is governed and owned by its members. Now, obviously, depending on the type of platform, the membership will be different, the various stakeholders will be different, but we can imagine, for example, in the case of Deliveroo, that the workers, the riders actually own the platform, govern it, decide how they're being paid, decide about their rights, etc. And so when I first approached this space, I was very interested in how we could sort of reflect on the fact if it was really the technology that was causing these impacts, or if it wasn't the organizations behind them. And I was looking at it as like, what can we create that's an alternative to Uber, that's an alternative to Deliveroo? But what's fascinated me the most in the last 2 years is how we're seeing platforms emerge in very different spaces and different sectors. And that's why I'm really excited to have both Emma and Jen join us today, and I really want to give as much space as possible to them to talk and to the audience to ask questions. So I'm going to hand it over to them. We're going to have first Jen tell us a bit more about their journey at Signco, and then we'll ask Emma to tell us about Equal Care Co-op. And then I'll hand it. I might ask a few questions at the end. I think, Irina, we also have another poll that we're going to launch soon.
We do.
We'll discuss a bit the results of that, and then Irina will facilitate your questions. If you could, when you're typing your questions in the chat, to indicate who the question is directed to, that would make it easier for us. It could also be both Emma and Jen, but please do that. Thanks. Jen, Irina, do you need to say anything at this point, or shall I?
Just an apology for those who wanted a live transcription of the webinar. We did look into this. Thank you, Jen, for all your support in that. I think we were using otter.ai, which is a great note-taking live transcription service. However, it just kind of got a little bit less simple when we had 4 panelists on. So apologies for that, but there will be audio transcription available for this webinar for those who are hard of hearing, and you can get that in the recorded version. So apologies that I haven't got the live transcription ready, but really fascinated with finding out more about that. Thank you, Jen, and I'm sure we're going to get better at that as we go.
Okay, Jen, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. which isn't working very well. There we go.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, so I'm from signco.io. We're a user-owned platform for interpreting services. I just want to say a quick hello to the Interpreting Collective, who are Banu and Luke, who I know are online. They do services for spoken languages, and we're the sign language version. So we're in quite close contact with them, and we're supporting each other. So we are for sign language interpreting service. I've been an interpreter for 16 years. And especially over the last 10 years, there's been incredible problems with sign language interpreting services. So I'll be talking about that and why we believe that a platform cooperative is the only solution to this problem. So we're a multi-stakeholder platform. So our members are deaf people, interpreters, and investor members. We don't yet have investor members. We're looking at launching a community share offer towards the end of this year. So we'll be getting investor members then. We are co-created and co-designed by our users, and we're looking at just delivering interpreting services in a completely different way. So as you can see, there are 87,000 deaf people in the country who use British Sign Language as their first preferred language. And there are only 50 interpreters on Merseyside. So there's quite an imbalance between the amount of interpreters that are available for deaf people. So at the moment, with the current procurement models, about 10 years ago, there was a really big problem with procurement. Suddenly, there was more and more privatisation of contracts. And especially in the Merseyside area, there was a procurement hub was set up to purchase 4 services, everything from light bulbs, toilet rolls, and interpreters were lumped into that. So we became a commodity for which people wanted to profit off, and a lot of the procurement is about warming up the market, seeing the best prices that government can get for us, and the sort of standards and ethical services really struggled to survive in this market over the last 10 years as more and more spoken language agencies have come in, and they tend to use sign language as a loss leader. So they really tend to undercut the local services that are around, such as the deaf organisations and other good practice models, for example, in-house council run services. And all of these good practice models have really been struggling to survive in this market, and quite a lot of the smaller specialist sign language agencies have collapsed as a result. And even the larger spoken language agencies, several have gone into liquidation over the last few years, just showing how unsustainable the current procurement practices are. On Merseyside, around half of the contracts are held by, this is for health and social care, by large spoken language agencies. And we have heard of cases where, for example, one deaf man was left in hospital for 21 days without any interpreting services at all. And the local interpreters down the road knew he was in there by word of mouth, by the community, but because they don't work for the local, well, the large spoken language agency in question, the large spoken language agency quite often will tell the hospitals that there's nobody available, which just isn't the case. What's happening is the larger agencies don't want to pay the rates that are needed, and deaf people end up without any communication support at all. We all get those text messages about our missed appointments and how much they cost the NHS. Usually it's in the region of about £160. So you can imagine every time a deaf person goes to their GP, if there's nobody available, that appointment has to be rebooked. So it's incredibly inefficient for public services to have an interpreting service that just doesn't work. And that's what we're aiming to fill that gap by being an ethical service, working with interpreters, making sure we have enough interpreters to supply. But also there's the matching aspect. So deaf people being able to choose their preferred interpreters, and for us via the platform to be able to match them up. Just wanting to mention that Sign Health had a report out called the Sick of It report, and it was £60 million over the whole of the UK that was wasted via this inefficient of booking interpreters. Obviously, the effects to deaf people's mental health are huge. I think most people on the call probably understand this, and I'm not going to talk about all of these points, but just the whole ethos of our platform cooperative follows much of the cooperative movement. So being co-created by members, owned by members, decentralized. Something else to mention on here is the big data and the tech factor. So not behaving like the likes of Apple, Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, but having that data owned by the cooperative so that everybody knows what's going on with their data. We're piloting in Merseyside. It's much more beneficial to pilot this in a smaller area. It's where it all started 10 years ago. It's a problem that we really want to fix up there. And the community up there is really strong. So that's why we've chosen Merseyside. So we're using sociocratic methods of governance to involve our members. And what we're doing, because we have deaf members, is actually it's not as straightforward as it might be. We have to think about the bilingual aspect. So our first meetings, a lot of them have been in sign language. We've done consultations. At the consultations, we've always had interpreters present. So we're constantly having to think about access, and we've brought somebody who is deaf to work with us, and hopefully we'll have more deaf members on board, but we're consulting with them about how we make the board processes and the management processes as accessible as possible, and also to ensure that our members can fully access what's going on as well. So how we've done it so far is we feel like there's still a lot to learn. There's so much to think about in terms of governance, not just the financing and the business side of things, but something that Emma Back said to me one of the first occasions that we met was a lot of time was focused on growing a community, and that's actually one of the most valuable pieces of advice I think I've had. Just really considering the community at all times, because I think it's quite easy to get into, I'm itching to get coding on our platform, but it's quite easy to get drawn into the platform side of things, or the finance aspect, or the day-to-day running and the management, and constantly having to adapt and change to everything that's going on. And the growing the community side has become really fundamental, because without them, there's no business. Without a business, there's no platform. Without a platform, there's no business again. So it's all fit so tightly together. So the tech behind what we're doing is predominantly JavaScript based. So we're using React for the front end. Express is the middleware, Node for the back end, a lot of APIs, and MySQL would be the database. So the APIs will be using either Google Maps or Mapbox, we haven't decided yet, and a whole host of other things, which we're hoping will make the platform really different from anything that's out there at the moment. And that's our contact details, although we are in the middle of rebranding at the moment, so it'll be something completely different in about 3 weeks. But we'll keep everybody updated via our newsletter. And the colours will be much nicer than the ones that we picked about a year ago when we first started. Yeah, so that's everything I've got to say at the moment.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you very much for that. I think let's just go with Emma, and then let's see, maybe we have a few questions for both of you. But yeah, go ahead. Emma, please go ahead.
Hey, hi everybody. I think, well, we didn't set out thinking, oh, let's start a platform co-op, because when first coming across this problem, this massive, wicked problem in social care, when I started working in it in community development in like 2011, 12, thereabouts, there weren't really, the big platforms were only just getting started, and I had never heard of co-ops. The genesis of Equal Care Co-op came about through kind of thinking about power, and thinking about how it was distributed or not distributed, where it was kind of kept in the social care system, and where it accrued and built up, and where it kind of vanished mysteriously in mysterious ways. I do have thing to share. I've actually finally managed to start talking about tech after doing kind of lots and lots of presentations about Equal Care Co-op. I haven't really talked about technology, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit here, which I think is quite exciting. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
I can't see it because it's completely, okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the why of it. It's about relationships, not kind of the atomized individual. It's about the person who's giving, and it's about the person who's receiving. And that's kind of it, really. Everything else is just the scaffolding that you put in place in order to make sure that that relationship remains sacrosanct, supported, trusted, respected, and powerful. And then allowing care and support to exist in abundance. So this is about kind of recognizing the diversity of ways in which we give and the diversity of ways in which we receive, rather than just seeing it as a very formal relationship procured by councils. It's something that we do every day as human beings. Little bit there about kind of what spurred me on. Social care is pretty shit at the moment, and there are some really, really amazing parts of it and really incredible examples of innovation and movements, so disability and recovery movements, kind of co-production and all of that, but this is sort of the reasons why they exist. So here, these unequal relationships, the people with the power are the ones who have got the money to buy the services, so the local authorities, NHS, also private providers who also do their own procurement, and then the givers, so kind of care workers, sort of to some extent, and then finally down here, the receivers of support. So yeah, thinking about, all right, how is power constituted? Where does it come from? What's the mandate? How is it built? Where does it go? Like, right, need to start thinking about organizational forms. This is how we're constituted. So we have 4 stakeholders making up our cooperative. You can see that we've given investor members a proportionate vote. Everyone else is 1 member, 1 vote as per original Rochdale principles, but the investor votes are weighted. This is because we have, well, I mean, it's kind of for obvious reasons. We want the people who are able to make the decisions about Equal Care Co-op to be the people who are participating in that economic relationship, so in the giving and in the receiving. This is just a little bit from kind of the prototypes to where we're at the moment. So kind of joining the community, becoming a member rather than a beneficiary or a service user. So language is so important. And suddenly everything starts to change the moment you start thinking about ownership and being a cooperative. That really changes how you speak in whatever sector you're working in. Suddenly all of your words start to change. It's kind of cool. And then, yeah, so make your choices, kind of the standard way that labour-based platforms, service-based platforms allow you to choose who offers you the service, and kind of based on their skills and expertise. And then this is the kind of helping people. So this is the idea that you can be a giver and you can be a receiver. So it's not a mandatory requirement that if you're wanting to receive care and support that you also need to give it. But it is about kind of building those possibilities into the platform, rather than kind of seeing people as fixed identities, as, you know, service user and care worker. This is just a little bit about growth. So Jen mentioned it earlier, but we're kind of using a sociocratic governance model, growing community by community. So looking at sort of semi-independent, sovereign communities was a phrase that I heard a couple of days ago from one of our new employees. So we're kind of looking along those lines for how we organise. And then this, so the commons contribution fee. So just thinking like this is the standard business model, the platform to use everywhere. Generally, it's about kind of, all right, how much profit are we able to extract from the transactions between the participants in the platform. So this is kind of re-understanding that idea as this is the equivalent of mowing the village green. So it's not going into kind of shareholders' pockets. We're not looking for an exit, but this is what the contribution that kind of needs to be made in order for the platform to be able to run. Oh, okay, yeah. So we're also involved in changing the way that regulation kind of works in England through the Care Quality Commission, which is looking at distributed teams and self-management. I can talk about that more if people are interested, but I'm going to skip past that slide, and I'm going to skip past that one. And these are our architectural principles. So one is about hats, one is about the light spectrum, one is about the consent, and then the other one is about Scrooge McDuck and Tiny Tim. I'm just gonna leave a couple of those completely kind of to bamboozle you. But the one that I want to go into is hats. So kind of taking the idea I was talking about earlier, you can be a giver, you can be a receiver, you can be a learner, you can be a teacher, you can be anything at any time in your life, you can fulfill any role. The way that a lot of the existing platforms relies on something like this. So this is like entity relationship management, it's called. So it assumes a database, kind of one-to-many, many-to-many sort of relationships. And when you get added to that database, you get added as a customer, or you get added as a supplier, or you get added as a product or an order. Basically, this is Mr. Chatterbox being swallowed by his hat. So there's no distinction between your role in the system or in the service and your identity, which is kind of rubbish. So that doesn't really work for the original sort of ethics and approach and aspirations, I guess, of equal care. So instead, we've been looking at graph databases which prioritize relationships, which kind of going back to the second slide, being relationship centered, going, right, that is kind of the most important thing. It's that ineffable bit of stuff that exists between two human beings or three human beings. And those are the things that we want to prioritize. And those are the things that we want to recognize. So this is called GraphQL, this kind of particular database that we're looking at. And this is kind of one of the most exciting things that I've seen over the past 2 months, which is our draft stack for building the platform this year. Again, I can talk more about that if that's where the curiosities are. This is just a bit about platform governance itself. So kind of how do we make sure that the delivery and dev team don't kind of ignore us? And then there are some milestones. So yeah, we're looking to be open beta or general release around spring 2020. What? No, that should read 2021. Sorry. There are some people who are involved. That's what we're looking for at the moment. So if you're a lead developer, or if you know a lead developer, or if you want to tweet about it, this is our current need. We want a lead developer. Stop share. There we go. It's mindful of death by
Thanks a lot, Emma, for that. Just for the next part, someone was saying that it was a bit hard to hear you when you were sitting back. So just if you can keep that in mind. But I think most of us could hear you, so thanks a lot for that. Irina, did we launch the other poll yet?
Sorry, just unmuting. There's a little bit of background noise. No, we can launch the poll now. And as we've got some questions, I've got some questions. So while we launch the poll, which will take a little bit of reading, if everyone spends a bit of time reading and then voting on it, that would be good. So I'll just share that now. So launch polling. This one, what are the biggest challenges for starting a platform co-op in your opinion? So this is to all the attendees and including the panelists. So please have a read of that. A, finding your team. B, covering your startup costs in the co-op governance model. acquiring providers of the service, F, acquiring users of the service, and other. And if you do put other, just let us know in the chat what other things you're really thinking about in that. So select your top 3 if you can. Not everything would be ideal, so we'll just let that run for a little while. So I did want to ask well, both Jen and Emma first, if Jen wants to go first. It's just, can you imagine having started what you were hoping to provide as a service in any other way? Was it absolutely paramount that it would have to be a platform, and was it absolutely paramount that it would need to be a platform first?
I've been involved in a startup before that was trying to produce a platform.
We've just lost the sound there.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, carry on, sorry.
So I've been involved before in something where we were trying to set up a platform, but it was really hard to try to sell the service and think about how we were going to have interpreters understanding the need for the service, so from the supply point of view, and also to deaf people. And it still felt that deaf people were still being left out. There wasn't any way for them to be really involved. And the traditional agency model is that anyone can set up a business within a couple of weeks, register with Companies House, set up a Twitter username and start marketing their services. And those kind of models of operation, I don't think are serving the community very well. And with the problems of the procurement that I explained before, I've really come to the point where I think the only way that we can do this is via a platform cooperative.
You're muted, Irina.
Yeah.
Apologies, there's some background noise and lights going off at the same time. Okay, thank you. Yes, and Emma, what about you? Again, did you want to start a platform co-op, or did you want to start a platform? Because you're involved with co-ops, you thought of just combining the two, but I mean, what came first?
I got really carried away by the possibilities of the technology first. I got really excited about it because I was, social care is not known for its tech innovation. So I was working in a context and in a field where there were just so many really easy wins, and those easy wins can translate directly into kind of much better experiences for the people at the sharp end, kind of like across the board. So yeah, I got really excited about technology and then ran up against a sort of a kind of just a general sort of why do we need what are you talking about? And then that forced me to go, all right, so you're really excited about this technology, you're in the whole kind of tech will save us kind of phase of this idea, and so I kind of had to take about 6 steps backwards and to go sort of what's sitting underneath that excitement. What do I think is going to happen as a result of using this kind of magical, wonderful bells and whistles platform that is, super ethical and could be a charity or could be a kick or could be there's this thing called co-ops. That's so yeah, and that only happened because of we did a few workshops. We ran well, not workshops, I just talked about it for a bit and posted a thing in our local website, like community website, and said, so this is I'm excited about this, and then ran 5 sessions locally, and then just kind of talked to a lot of people once I managed to get out of my attic and stop being really scared about talking to people. That also helped. But yeah, it only became a platform co-op when I read Trevor Schultz's and Nathan Schneider's paper that they published in 2016, and kind of went, oh, this is it. Yeah, this is the container. Like, it's not the idea, but it's the container for the idea, and it's perfect.
Ludovica, I don't know if you've got any questions. I just want to launch the poll if you're able to ask anything, and then we just I'm going to try and get a bit more of an idea about our attendees as well, and some of the things that they've been thinking about and doing within their own work. So just ending the poll and sharing the results of that. So we can see that 58% are mostly about covering your startup costs and how you do that. That would be a good question to ask both Jem and Emma. Understanding the co-op governance model, that's not unsurprising. And we find that a lot, I think, in the co-op sector. But that would be interesting as well to know, did you come across the difficulties in finding not just that you were going to be doing it cooperatively because that's more ethical, but also which model you were looking to as well, and how embroiled does that get? Is there a better way of doing that? 42% acquiring the users of your service, and interestingly, just on the one about monetizing your platform, I guess if most are co-operators, that's probably not the key thing that people are thinking about, but cooperation is also about sustainability. So I'm interested to know how you do monetize your idea and how that's working for you. You're going to be employing staff. It's interesting to know how that's working and how you do actually raise funds in order to keep your platform co-op going. So covering your startup costs, understanding the co-op governance model, and for me, if possible, monetizing your platform. Jen, do you want to start first?
Sorry, did you say Emma or Jen?
Jen, sorry.
So that's three things. Covering the startup costs. I looked at what Emma got and then I just applied to the same people. So I probably cheated a bit, but the first thing we did was apply to the Hive, which was Co-operatives UK support, which was absolutely invaluable. I don't think we would have got where we are after a year, because it's actually a year anniversary since we all got together and started to do this. So that was it, really invaluable. So not perhaps monetary support, but other types of support. And we got some early stage funding from Unlimited. So that was, as an individual, I applied for that. And also the Paul Hamlin Foundation is pretty much funding our platform development phase. We have applied to some others and not got them for a variety of reasons, which is unfortunate, but we kind of sit between that. We're not social impact enough for some people, and we're too much of a business, and perhaps we're not a charity, so we don't always get success with our funding applications. But because we do have social impact, that's how we've managed to get the funding that we have so far. We're looking at crowdfunding next, and then a community share offer towards the end of 2020. So understanding the co-op governance model. Well, our legal model is a multi-stakeholder cooperative. That was because just before I started this, I went to a workshop paid for by the Hive, and Petra Morris was there, and I was going, but I don't understand, is it going to be a workers' cooperative or I don't understand what it could be? And I explained it, and she went, oh, it's a multi-stakeholder. And it was a bit of a no-brainer after I'd had that conversation. It's like, of course it is. Of course it can be involving deaf people. It doesn't just have to be about the workers aspect, and actually it's better that way. So that's the legal aspect, but in terms of the governance, we're still setting up our circles, we're still building capacity on the ground, we're still looking for circle leads, circle facilitators, watching a lot of webinars and reading a lot of books about the sociocratic model. It seems to be popping up in my life everywhere I go, so it's clearly the thing to do at the moment. So what was the next one? Monetizing your platform. We're pretty much doing what Equal Care are doing, so an add-on fee of so an admin fee per booking, which is the simplest way of doing it. That's to be expected whenever you're running a service. It's just a straightforward admin fee. Because we have the money to build the platform, a lot of the initial costs for the first year are being covered by the funding. So we're hoping to increase the amount of bookings that we get in the Merseyside area quite quickly, in order for us to break even at a quicker point. but we're doing a lot of work on our financial projections at the moment. So we're trying to work out what that point is, and what we kind of need to do to get to the point where we do a community share offer. So it's not easy at all, but I think the amount of support that we've had out there has been really fundamental, really, to this journey.
And Emma, thank you, Jen. Really good response. Emma, if you want to, again, just cover some of those that have been listed, and also because 42% find acquiring users of the service also very difficult, perhaps you want to address that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. Okay, well, the financing aspect. So at the moment, our projections are that we're not going to break even until 2022, which is actually quite early for platform business models to be revenue positive. It's about the earliest that we can kind of make it in our projections, actually. We have been in the kind of the equivalent land of equity financing. We spent about 1.5 years getting pre-seed funding, which is through the combination of funders that kind of Jen was mentioning. So Unlimited, Paul Hamlin, Bright Ideas, a couple of other ones, which I can't remember now. And yeah, we ran across so I had kind of some long conversations with Big Lottery. And yeah, we've got a real problem as cooperatives in the UK because we don't have access to the statutory asset lock. And because we don't have that access, that means that the main grant funders have an issue with giving money to an organisation that could technically redistribute it immediately to its members. So there's the kind of the private benefit clause in a lot of grant funders, which makes it very difficult for them to fund co-ops, even though the whole point of co-ops is that it is genuine ownership and genuine control. And that means genuine ownership and control over the finances. So that was frustrating. Then running the community share offer is like, Access Foundation. So Access Foundation are, I think, the only grant funder in the UK that I could find anyway that actually give you money to raise money. And it takes so long, and it is blood, sweat and tears, and it is so many tears and terror as well. There was a lot of terror. And going out again, because we're going to be going out again in spring 2021 in order to raise more. So the massive issue that platform co-ops have with financing is that there's no accepted model in the UK apart from community shares to finance this kind of thing. And using community shares without a bricks and mortar asset is a real struggle. Supposedly, I mean, it is possible. It's possible. So we're actually looking at redesigning the share offer to make it something that's a little bit more aligned to the private market, which might be a little bit more, I don't know. We're gonna have to see what comes out of that, but we're looking at the overall kind of regulatory context for launching an offer. And seeing whether we might be able to make it a little bit more attractive to investors, but without giving up that crucial power. So yeah, financing, ongoing, terror, general terror. Acquiring, I'll go on to acquiring users. I mean, we're still massively experimental on that front at the moment. So I can talk about the experiment that we're running, and then if it ends up being a failed experiment, then we're going to have to go much more down the route of the for-profit platform business models for user acquisition, member acquisition. Ugh. And at the moment, we're looking at a completely grassroots model. So using the circle structure and sociocracy to support groups of people in their local communities to come together to solve the care and support problems in that area, and to be in charge of solving those problems, not for Equal Care Co-op to be in charge of it, but for them to be in charge of it. And So in a sense, that's kind of like our marketing budget. So instead of going, we're going to advertise on the back of a bus and all over the tube, and, you know, we're going to do our ITV advert and blah, 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 we're going to look at where that spend usually goes, which is into, you know, clickbait and all of that sort of horrible advertising stuff, but that does kind of work. And we're going to experiment with a kind of grassroots model of like word of mouth. You know, there's a note up in your local post office kind of thing. I've got no idea whether this is going to work. Full disclosure on that. But it is completely congruent with our, you know, ideals about how we grow, and about the kind of, yeah, the sort of nasty little nest of snakes and ethics that comes around with advertising, and especially when you're advertising to people who are in vulnerable situations. Yeah, so ask in a year. It's really hard. One thing I will say is it's really hard acquiring your first users and expecting that to be what you're going to see as the platform develops and grows. So like the first kind of 10 are going to be much more work than, and are much more work than the kind of than the next 20 and then the next 50. So yeah, expect a lot of face-to-face time, because they're also sort of, yeah, building it with you. And it's a platform co-op, so they're also members and owners of the business as you go. So that changes the dynamic quite a lot in a good way. Co-op governance model. So sociocracy is cool, but it is not the be all and end all. It has some serious flaws. Just never, ever try and do kind of serious HR conversations using like circle consent methods, because it's horrible. I'm saying this, we haven't actually like fully tried doing that. But if you take sociocracy kind of right to the nth degree, then you could actually sack someone by a consent-based process with your circle. So instead of getting sacked by like your line manager or, you know, one or two people who think that there's kind of issues with your performance or whatever, you're sacked by your entire team, which is horrific and like bullying and ostracizing and kind of one of just the worst experiences that I could ever imagine imposing on anyone. So we're not doing that. And evolving kind of different ways to sort of approach the really difficult questions, like, all right, social, you know, consent stuff and all of that is really lovely when things are going right, but we need to talk about what happens when things go wrong, and we need to do that before things go wrong, because then otherwise you get like ridiculous knee-jerk reactions and everyone gets really litigious and you know. So yeah, so like don't fall in love with any particular system, just kind of try stuff and see what sticks, and don't be afraid to throw stuff out if it doesn't work or if you like fundamentally disagree with it. I think is my message on that. Was there anything else? I talked about monetizing, or we're also doing contracting and local authority stuff with the NHS. So yeah, understand. Yeah. I'm gonna stop there.
Irina, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in. I'm just going to share in the chat. I've been working on a spreadsheet with a list of sort of tech for good funders. I haven't been developing it over the last 2 months. I haven't added anything, but this is kind of a good place to start, and then yeah, from there start expanding onto others. But also, if there are funders that are there that are not there that you know of, please, you know, get in touch, and this is an open resource that we really want the community to use. And then I'll also, while I'm at it, I'll put a link to the Unfound website and the sign up page for the newsletter, and that's where we share information about both the amazing platform co-ops and what they're doing, but also like any events or any training or any interesting articles around platform co-ops. So just yeah, subscribe to that if you're interested in this topic. I guess like I just have a very quick question to Emma and Jen, and then we pass it on to the audience because we don't have much time. Would you agree with the sort of prioritization of like what are the real challenges? Like, was there a difference between like the challenges you thought you had to address at the very start, but actually turns out, oh, you were dedicating, I don't know, too much time to one thing, but that you should have got on with another thing. So kind of the questions about like these challenges, which are the ones that you should be prioritizing, or are you meant to be working on them all at the same time?
I closed the list. Sorry. Jen, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think it's a real juggling act, isn't it, between growing all the time, and it very much depends. So we feel like with the providers of the service, because we're coming slightly more from a supply point of view, and workers are the greatest membership of the co-op at present, that acquiring providers of the services isn't going to be that much of a problem for us. We could be wrong, but we hope we're not. So we've always tried to think about growing capacity within the sort of management, the board, and covering the startup costs. But then at the same time, you need to prioritise the governance model. So it's this real sort of plate spinning thing of organising everything and feeling like you have to do it all at the same time when you start. And even after a year of getting together, I've barely scratched the governance, I think, barely scratched the surface of the governance stuff that we need to do. And acquiring users of the service, deaf people don't pay for interpreting services, the health and social care do. And that's going to be that's our absolute biggest barrier, is getting people to pay for the service and winning contracts within health and social care. And until we've got something to show them, it's a real balancing act constantly. So I don't have any clear answers, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it depends on whether, so Jen actually knows how to code, which is a real benefit. You do. and one of your co-founders as well is a coder. Is that right? So yeah, so like that really, really helps. So no one on our founding team knew how to code. So, so it's taken quite a long time to develop the tech, which has also meant that we've been looking at technology, right? How does this really fit in line with our kind of purpose, like a practical purpose, like the practical implementation of your purpose. So that's kind of interesting. So instead, what we're doing this year is what we're affectionately terming Frankenstein, which is a kind of mix of third-party apps that we are joining together through a mix of like automations and zaps and kind of integrated like apps and all of this sort of stuff. And it's ridiculous. Like sometimes his leg falls off, and you kind of go, oh, the form's broken again. And oh, so this is this sort of really kind of ugly minimum viable product that we're doing. We know it's like nowhere capable of scaling, but we need to be offering a service in the way that we're intending to offer it, with the sort of the structures and the roles and all of the ways that we're setting up, using this kind of like Frankenstein like kind of stitched together technology while we're building the platform this year. So that is as well as prepping for the raise in spring, which is not to be underestimated. And as well as registering with the Care Quality Commission, and helping to change the scope of how services are regulated in England. So yeah, the whole plate spinning thing is just bonkers. Like I've been awake since midnight, and I have a 1-year-old. He's 2 today, so yeah. I know. I just sometimes look around and go, what the fuck? Okay. just keep going. Like persistence is a virtue. Just keep going.
I'll just interrupt there before Emma swears. So we have only got 5 or so minutes left. And before we go back to you, Ludovica, I'm just going to quickly just talk through some of the things on the chat where people were mentioning platform co-ops. They were interested in starting reach access. monies are slowing up, more difficult to get now. This is told by an access point. That means something to somebody, I'm sure. Sorry, I'm not tech-minded that way. E-learning and one-to-one enterprise startups, other people interested in starting that. I'm working for a platform co-op called Co-op Exchange. It's a mobile app, allow people to invest in co-ops, which is interesting. Also, 2 weeks, I've co-founded an online publication, co-op owned, act as a business advisor. So definitely Mark Gardner using the platform to its fullest. And other people about sociocracy and yes, some of the HR difficulties in running sociocratic models. We do run webinars about sociocracy and some of the difficulties with that. Others are considering launching a funeral service for co-ops where users pay a monthly fee to secure a lump sum payment on death. So interesting views coming through on the chat. There was also a question from Elaine Perry. Has anyone set up a traditional funded platform, maybe for you, Vika, if you know this, then flipped to a platform co-op later once cash flow is in place, avoiding the initial seed funding pains?
I don't know if others have examples. I don't have examples of them. I think what is happening is that there are a lot of conversations around it. What I think is interesting is I'm hearing more and more, not cooperatives, but online communities that are interested in transitioning to the platform co-op model because they want to empower more their community by including them in the governance and the ownership. So yeah, I think that you can arrive to the platform co-op model through very different journeys, and we'll see what comes out of that.
Is working on this at the moment, so I've just dropped a link in the chat. It's called Exit to Community. So they're working on a model where traditionally funded platforms and traditionally financed platforms can then exit to the community of users. Link is in the chat. And he's in London in a few weeks.
He's not anymore, I'm afraid.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah, he's had to cancel his flight, so I'll be sending out information about that if any of you subscribe to the event that we were organizing for him, unfortunately.
It's sad. Okay.
So Vika, would you like to end with a little bit of information about the Unfound newsletter and where people can find that, and also any more details that they need from this webinar? I'll be able to send to everyone who's joined a link on where you can see this again. And if you do want any of the PowerPoints and details from Emma and Jen, let me know. And Emma and Jen, is it okay to share some of the things that you were sharing on your PowerPoints? Thank you. So yes, so just finishing off with Vika then on where you can get much more information about this and where you take your idea from here.
So yeah, for who doesn't know this, Unfound is sort of the brand under which Co-ops UK, with other organisations to action and with support from the Cooperative Bank, develops the work around platform co-ops. And so there's a specific website for this where you can find out more information about platform co-ops. We're currently looking at developing a support program for platform co-ops, probably starting next year. But for now, as Emma and Jen have mentioned, please visit the Hive website. I can paste it in the chat, or maybe Irina, you can, as that is the main way that we have been supporting platform co-ops with, we provide advice and quite tailored to what your needs are. Other websites definitely worth looking at, and I can either put them in the chat or send them to Irina so she can send to you. It's the platform.coop website, which is run by the New School in New York, Trevor Schultz, one of the founders of the platform co-op movement, and the Internet of Ownership website as well, which is run by Nathan Schneider, and it's a really incredible resource of, he basically puts every article about platform co-ops. Everything that's been published is kind of on there, and there's also an attempt to create a directory with platform co-ops. So yeah, I think that's all from me, and thank you very, very much for joining us.
Yes, and from Co-ops UK, thank you, Emma, thank you, Jen, thank you, Vika, for doing this and for creating a really interesting narrative around how you began your platform co-ops. I think it's really important to find out about the people behind the platforms. They say if you want to know about software, you've got to find out more about the people behind the software. So it is really important to hear your stories. Thank you. And hopefully, if you're interested in more about this, then please email me. Again, my internet's not been great this time around, but I'm hoping that you got a good gist of what's been going on. As Vika said, there is more support if you do need it. Please get in contact with Co-ops UK on uk.coop, if nothing else. And we look forward to sharing more information with you soon and seeing you perhaps around the country and some of the road shows that the Unfound may be doing, if it's Corona permitted. But thank you. We've all been quite safe in our socially isolated environments. So it's wonderful to be able to do this via webinar. If you do want to see more like this, please let us know. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.